He was one of the most wonderful gentlemen that I've ever had the good fortune to meet and work with. Well, of course, I had dreams of it being finalized with marriage and babies and things like that, but it wasn't meant to be.
There are some lives that look flawless from a distance, until you hear what was never said out loud. Lana Turner was adored by millions. Her beauty, her fame, her presence lighting up an entire era of Hollywood. But behind that glow was a quiet pattern, one she could never quite escape. She didn't marry for headlines. She married for hope. Again and again she believed the next man would be different, that this time love would stay. But by the end of her life, after everything she had lost and everything she had learned, one truth remained. The love she was searching for had already come and gone. And the truth is, her love of life was not any of her husband. Stay until the end to find out. When love begins too fast, it often ends too soon. At the very beginning of her journey, Lana Turner didn't fall in love slowly. She fell all at once, completely, fearlessly, and without hesitation. Her first marriage to Artie Shaw seemed, on the surface, like a perfect union. He was intelligent, cultured, already established. To a young woman stepping into Hollywood's unforgiving spotlight, he felt like stability, like direction, like safety. But what appears strong from the outside can feel suffocating behind closed doors. Shaw's personality was intense, often overpowering. Conversations became corrections. Affection became expectation. And slowly, almost quietly, Lana began to feel something she didn't yet have the words for: distance inside closeness. The marriage didn't collapse in a dramatic moment. It faded in silence, and when it ended, it left behind something more lasting than heartbreak: confusion. Because she had believed that this was what love was supposed to feel like. So she didn't step back, she stepped forward again. With Stephen Crane, the story became even more complicated. Their relationship didn't begin in calm, it began in chaos. There were questions, timing issues, whispers of scandal. But none of that slowed her down. If anything, it pulled her in deeper. They married, then separated, then married again. That cycle alone said more than words ever could. And yet, within that instability, something meaningful did emerge. Their union gave her a daughter, something real, something permanent, in a life that was quickly becoming anything but. But love itself? It still refused to settle. Because what Lana was chasing wasn't just companionship, she was chasing certainty. And already, without realizing it, she had begun a pattern that would follow her for years, mistaking intensity for love and hoping it would finally stay. The one love that never stayed, but never left her heart. Some people come into your life quietly and somehow leave the deepest mark. For Lana Turner, that man was Tyrone Power. He wasn't loud, he wasn't overwhelming. He didn't try to control her or impress her with force. Instead, there was something disarming about him, something calm, almost effortless. And for perhaps the first time, Lana didn't feel like she had to chase love. She simply felt it. Their connection carried a different kind of weight. It wasn't built on urgency or instability. It was built on presence, on moments that didn't need explanation, on a feeling that seemed, for once, to exist without fear. And that alone made it rare in her life. But sometimes, the love that feels the most right is the one that slips away the easiest. Tyrone Power never fully chose her. Whether it was timing, pressure, or the quiet complications of two rising stars moving through the same demanding world, something always held him back. He cared for her, deeply, genuinely, but not in a way that anchored itself into a future. And that was the difference, because Lana didn't just want love. She wanted something that stayed. There have long been whispers, never fully confirmed, that their relationship left behind something more. A possibility that never had the chance to become real. Whether true or not, What remains undeniable is the emotional imprint he left on her. After him, every relationship felt louder, more chaotic, more uncertain, because she had already experienced something quieter, something real, and she never found it again. Years later, through marriages, scandals, and heartbreak, one pattern quietly followed her. She kept searching for a feeling she had already known. Not the most dramatic love, not the most passionate, but the one that felt like peace. And in the end, that was the love that stayed with her the longest, even though he didn't. Everything money could buy, except the one thing she needed most. By the late 1940s, Lana Turner had already learned that love could disappoint, but she hadn't yet learned that comfort could feel just as empty. When she married Henry J. Topping, everything appeared to settle into place. He was wealthy, established, dependable in ways her earlier partners had not been. There were no sudden storms, no emotional chaos, no instability that shook her world overnight. From the outside, it looked like she had finally found balance. But inside, something was missing. Because stability on its own is not the same as connection. There were no great conflicts in this marriage, but there were no great depths either. Conversations stayed on the surface. Affection felt routine. And slowly, almost invisibly, a different kind of loneliness began to take shape. The quiet kind. The kind that exists even when someone is sitting right beside you. And Lana, who had always chased feeling, began to realize that comfort without emotion can feel colder than chaos. Then came Howard Hughes, a man who represented something entirely different. Power, obsession, control wrapped in fascination. Hughes didn't offer calm. He offered intensity, but of a different kind. His interest in Lana wasn't simple admiration. It was consuming, possessive, the kind of attention that watches closely, that wants to define, that doesn't easily let go. For a moment, it may have felt like importance, like being chosen. But attention is not the same as love. And Lana, by now, was beginning to sense the difference, even if she couldn't fully walk away from it yet. Between Topping's emotional distance and Hughes's controlling fascination, she found herself caught between two extremes, one that felt empty and one that felt overwhelming, and neither felt like what she had once experienced before. Not quiet, not safe, not real, surrounded by desire, yet still searching for something real. By now, Lana Turner was no longer searching quietly. She was surrounded by attention, admiration, and men the world itself couldn't stop watching. With Clark Gable, there was an undeniable presence. He carried a kind of confidence that filled a room before he even spoke. On screen, their chemistry felt effortless. Off-screen, there was a pull, something natural, something unforced. But some connections live best in moments, not in permanence. What they shared never rooted itself into anything lasting. It remained what Hollywood often creates so well, something that feels real, just long enough to disappear. Then came Frank Sinatra. With him, the energy shifted. Sinatra brought intensity, charisma, and a kind of emotional unpredictability that could feel exciting, until it wasn't. There was attraction, yes, but also noise. A constant movement, a rhythm that never quite slowed down long enough to become something steady. And Lana, who had already begun to understand the difference between attention and meaning, found herself once again in something that looked powerful from the outside, but felt incomplete within. Even earlier, there had been Mickey Rooney, a connection from a different time in her life, when everything was still new, still forming. But like so many early Hollywood relationships, it carried more curiosity than depth, and that, in many ways, defined this chapter of her life. She wasn't lacking options. She was lacking something real, because admiration can surround you, desire can follow you, and yet neither one will ever replace the quiet certainty of being truly understood. By now, Lana had lived through charm, power, and attention in every form. But none of it brought her back to that one feeling she couldn't forget, the one that didn't need to prove itself, the one that simply existed. And without realizing it, every step forward was beginning to feel like a step away from it. When passion burns bright, but leaves nothing safe behind. By the time Lana Turner entered this phase of her life, love no longer arrived as innocence. It arrived as intensity. With Lex Barker, there was something immediate, something physical, magnetic, undeniable. He was strong, charismatic, and carried a presence that felt grounded in a way Hollywood often wasn't. At first, it felt different, more real, more tangible. And perhaps that's why she trusted it. But sometimes, what feels strong on the surface can hide something deeply unsettling underneath. As their marriage unfolded, troubling realities began to emerge, allegations and tensions that cast a shadow over everything they had built. Whether spoken openly or held in silence, the weight of those concerns changed the atmosphere completely. Because love cannot survive where safety begins to feel uncertain. And for Lana, that realization came at a cost. The relationship ended not with clarity, but with discomfort, with the sense that something had been mistaken again. Still, she didn't stop. She couldn't. Soon after, she turned toward a different kind of life with Fred May. Away from Hollywood. Away from the noise. Texas offered something quieter, something slower. And for a moment, it seemed like this might finally be the answer. Not passion, not power, but simplicity. But simplicity alone isn't enough if the connection isn't there. The rhythm of that life didn't match who she had become. The silence that once felt peaceful began to feel distant. And once again, the relationship faded. Not through chaos, but through absence. By now, a pattern had become impossible to ignore. Every version of love she tried. Intense, stable, powerful, simple. Each one failed in a different way. And somewhere beneath all of it was a quiet truth she hadn't fully faced yet. She wasn't just searching for love. She was searching for a feeling she had already lost. The love that turned into fear and changed everything forever. By the time Johnny Stompanato entered Lana Turner's life, she had already experienced love in many forms: illusion, passion, comfort, disappointment, but nothing prepared her for this. Stompanato didn't arrive gently. He arrived with presence, dark, intense, impossible to ignore. There was a kind of danger around him, the kind that doesn't announce itself clearly at first, but slowly reveals itself over time. At the beginning, it may have felt like strength, like protection, like someone who wouldn't walk away. But what holds on too tightly often begins to suffocate. Their relationship quickly became volatile. Arguments weren't quiet, they were explosive. Emotions didn't settle. They escalated. And behind closed doors, what once resembled passion began to turn into something far more troubling. Fear. Lana, who had spent years chasing love, now found herself trapped in something she couldn't easily define and couldn't easily escape, because this wasn't just emotional anymore. It was unpredictable. And then came the night that would change everything. In 1958, inside her own home, a confrontation escalated beyond control. Voices raised, tension breaking. A moment where everything that had been building finally reached its limit. And in the middle of it stood her daughter, Cheryl Crane. What happened next would become one of Hollywood's most shocking tragedies. Stompanato was killed, an act later ruled as justifiable, but one that left a permanent mark on Lana's life. Not just publicly, but personally. Because this was no longer about love gone wrong. This was about survival. After everything, one truth became impossible to ignore. Not all intense love is real love. Some of it is simply something you must escape. And for the first time in her life, Lana Turner wasn't walking away from heartbreak. She was walking away from danger. After all the men, the truth she could no longer ignore. After the chaos, after the headlines, after the kind of night that changes a life forever, something inside Lana Turner grew quieter. Not healed, but quieter. When Robert Eaton entered her life, he represented something she hadn't truly experienced before: stability without pressure. There was no overwhelming intensity, no suffocating control, no illusion pretending to be something more. For a time, it worked, but by now, Lana was no longer the woman she had once been. Too much had happened. Too many versions of love had already come and gone. And even in calm, there was a distance she couldn't quite close. Because peace, when it comes too late, can feel unfamiliar. Then came Ronald Dante, a relationship that, at first, seemed light, almost refreshing. He brought energy, charm, a different kind of presence that didn't carry the same weight as her past. But even that didn't last, because by now, the pattern wasn't outside of her anymore. It was within her. Years of searching, hoping, and losing had shaped something deeper, an understanding she could no longer avoid. She had tried every version of love: the powerful, the passionate, the safe, the dangerous, and none of them stayed. Which left only one question: what had she been comparing them all to? The answer had been there for years: quiet, unresolved, unfinished, Tyrone Power. He was the one who didn't overwhelm her, the one who didn't control her, the one who didn't leave behind chaos or fear. Just something simple, something real. And maybe that was the truth she carried to the end. Not that he was perfect, but that he was the closest thing she ever felt to love without pain. In the end, the story of Lana Turner was never really about the number of men who entered her life, or even the ones who left. It was about a feeling, a quiet, almost invisible kind of love, the kind that doesn't demand, doesn't overwhelm, doesn't need to prove itself, the kind she found once and spent the rest of her life trying to recognize again. Maybe you've felt something like that too. A person who didn't stay, but never really left you either. And as time moves forward, you begin to understand. It wasn't the loudest love that mattered. It was the one that felt like peace. That was the love she never forgot, and perhaps the one she was always returning to, in memory. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of someone, somewhere in your own life, then stay with us, because some stories aren't just watched, they're remembered quietly.